when you get to this point in the season, I think all of us are now looking forward to the playoffs. There are only a handful of games left, and possible playoff opponents are Toronto and Tampa Bay. I would much rather have this team play Toronto because they're Toronto. Tampa Bay just seems like they're kind of lying in the weeds, and they had trouble with Tampa Bay when they went down there and played them. What is your feeling on this?
Yeah, they certainly match up better with Toronto. Tampa Bay still has a lot of really good players, and they have Vasilevsky. And, I think, in my opinion, I think he's the best goalie in the league. So if you have to play the best goalie in the league in the first round, that can spell danger for you. So I think that the better matchup is Toronto, but Toronto's surging as well. So it's pick your poison. But I think, if they had their druthers, they'd probably want to open with Toronto because they've played so well against them the last, 5 years or so. And they match up really well. There are little laps on defense. Toronto, they have the high scores, but the Bruins are able to shut those down, and they have two good goalies. So I think if they had their druthers, they'd want to play Toronto in the first round.
I would think
out of
so.
Those two.
Yeah, I would think so too, and for the reasons you mentioned, and I said it last week, I want nothing to do with Tampa Bay, but it's going to suck when Toronto finally breaks through and finally, figures this thing out, and they are able to make some kind of a run in the playoffs to be one of the teams that, they get over on. And eventually it almost has to happen to the Bruins, Jim. I mean, it's been a really long time, but when it does happen, it feels like it might be in a year like this where they started off so strong, but as they get closer to the playoffs, Maroon being in there helps, but there's still a couple of things lacking on this team, and I don't give them a pass against any first-round opponent.
No, absolutely not, because they still need to get more consistent secondary scoring. Yeah. You can't depend on just Pasta in the playoffs because teams will scheme against him and they'll make life miserable for him. And when you're playing teams, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in a row, it's a lot different than a one and done. So they need to have, more scoring from the second and third lines and, maybe a goal here or there from the fourth line. But if you're thinking that it's just going to be Zacha, Pasta, and Heinen on that first line, and that's the only scoring line, well, then you're in trouble because no team can survive in the playoffs if you've only got one line. And I think that's what they need right now is to get some more consistent secondary scoring.
All right. Are they tough enough for what they last year? It seemed like they couldn't keep up with the physical beatings. Are they tough enough this year?
Yeah, I think they showed against Florida last week that they are willing to play the physical game, and I think Maroon's addition helps them a lot because he's just a guy that knows what it takes, and these guys are going to thrive off his energy and his ability to make guys be a little wary of coming into the crease and knocking their goalie around. So I think they're tough enough. I think guys like Frederick and Lauko are always willing to get in the mix, but there's also some pretty tough guys on the back end too. Charlie McAvoy's a very physical player. So I think they have that there. Now it ratcheted up in the playoffs, obviously. So they're gonna need to match that intensity that they had in Sunrise last week on a nightly basis, and that's where the rub is. Can they do it on a consistent basis? Can they do it every night of the playoffs when every single shift is hard?
But that's the thing I worry about, and you brought up the Florida game. That's one thing we saw. Florida, very physical team, and in the playoffs last year, they targeted McAvoy and really beat the crap out of him. And the idea is, can the Bruins respond? I think they're willing, but I don't know if they have enough players to do that without getting someone they really care about involved.
Yeah, and I think that's another reason why they made the trade for Andrew Peeke. He didn't fit in well this season in Columbus, but he's fit in really well here. He's very hard on a hard guy to play against. He's hard on pucks. He's hard on bodies, and I think he can take some of that pressure off of McAvoy. And I think by the fact that he's pretty much played the last 10 games, they're really happy with how he's fit in, and he's played with a number of different partners. So I think that was clearly addressed at the deadline that they needed toughness, and they got two guys who are tough to play against.
Plenty of reasons to question Montgomery after the first-round exit last year. He seemed to kind of take control of the situation, or tried to last week. Do you have any questions about him as the coach for this team going into this playoff season?
No, I think he's a really good coach. I think, and I've said this before, I think he has an excellent ability to play good cop, bad cop. he's not afraid to ream out a guy, even in an open practice. We saw that last week. But he's also a guy who knows how to, put his arm around a guy's shoulder and pump him up when he needs to. So, that was a disaster last year in the playoffs, and I don't think you can put it all on coaching. Absolutely. So I think he's the perfect guy for this job. He came in, following a guy who was very successful here in Bruce Cassidy, and was able to kind of gain these players' trust pretty quickly. So I think he's a really good coach.
Yeah, it had to suck for him last year, losing the way he did, and then having Cassidy do what he did. I mean, that's got to be the worst case scenario. So
for the whole organization.
Yeah, exactly. It just it wasn't good. So hopefully they can rectify that. All right, Jim McBride, we'll talk to you come playoff time if you will be so kind. We appreciate the time as always. Read him in the Boston Globe.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Jim.
There you go, Jimmy McBride.